Hi everyone, welcome back to The Learning Gardener. If you haven't been here before, my name is Pip, and I had someone ask me the other day, why do I do it? Why do I spend so much time in the garden? Why do I put so much effort into growing my own food? So I thought I would share my answer with you guys today. The first and biggest driving reason for why I do what I do is my health. I have had health problems my entire life. As a kid, I was in hospital nearly every 6 weeks. After having soy milk as a substitute for breast milk, I became anaphylactic to breast milk as well. And then I had food issues on and off throughout my childhood, as well as asthma and eczema. As an adult, when I was 24 and a half, I had thyroid cancer, and I was that person that was the 1 in a million. So I had so many things happen to me then that they were like, this would only happen to like 1 in a million of thyroid cancer cases, not even just 1 in a million in the population. And yeah, I went through a lot, and they thought I had a brain tumor that was driving it all, and basically I was a mess for years after that. Since then, I've wrestled with multiple types of autoimmune issues, including 2 different types of alopecia, and more recently I gave birth to a stillborn son. So my health is the driving force for everything that I do here. I was also hoping that Ollie, my boy, would benefit from growing the food and maybe have a different start to life than I had, but it didn't work out that way. So as you can imagine, with a medical history like mine, I've had a few blood tests in my time, and what I noticed was when I started gardening on a really small scale in the garden before I had this one, when I was just renting down on the south coast to see if I wanted to make the move permanent, I noticed that for the first time in years, my liver blood tests improved. I wasn't able to grow enough food at that time that I could eat exclusively homegrown veg like I could now, but it was enough that it made a huge difference to my body and that my blood tests improved, which was amazing to see and a huge motivation to continue to push on. And I have noticed at times where when I've eaten more processed food for whatever reason in a particular period, that my blood tests are not as good in that time period as when I have focused more on eating things that I have grown in this garden. Another reason why I grow my own food for health purposes, and not just my health purposes, is for my dogs. So Dobby is wandering around here. He's my mum's dog, and we are looking after him for another 24 hours. We've had him for 2 weeks, and yesterday he painted the living room in diarrhea. So that was a fun thing to wake up to. But the bonus of growing my own food is that I have pumpkins on standby to settle his gut. But I can also grow a range of other vegetables for my dogs. I raw feed my dogs. You want to smell it? I raw feed my dogs, and obviously if I have the choice of providing them with pesticide-free organic produce that we've grown from home, then absolutely I'm going to do that. So this year, for the first time, I tried making a garden bed with plants that were intended for the dogs. I definitely need to plant more next season and coming into this cool season to cover both me and them, but it's definitely something that I'm aware of because I just love my dogs. They've been through hell with me, and if I can keep them around for as long as humanly possible and have them be healthy, then that's what I want to do. Another benefit of growing my own food, and that's something that definitely keeps me motivated, is being able to provide my best friend and her family with produce as well. If my family lived closer, I would be happy to share with them, obviously, but my best friend literally lives 3 doors down, and my family live 3 hours away. So when I go to Sydney, I take food with me to share with my family, but the main benefactor for this garden is my best friend. So I have loved being able to grow loads and loads of cherry tomatoes, and we've got some here that are a volunteer variety, and there's just masses and masses of them, but I need to get in here. I'm just a little low on the motivation because they're all mostly full of fruit fly at this point in the season, but it's been really lovely to be able to grow particularly Valentine tomatoes, which her kids have loved having in their lunchbox for school, and it really, like, I love knowing that those kids who I love are eating good quality, I want to say organically grown produce, but the truth is, like, I don't say that my garden is organic and that the produce is organic purely because I still use fertilizers from the hardware store, because this garden's only in its second year and I'm still working on building up the soil quality, and also because I know that people in the neighborhood spray Roundup, and I know that there's evidence that shows that if someone in your area sprays Roundup, that you would fail the organic test. So that's why I don't say organic, but it does bring me a lot of joy to know that her kids really love the produce that comes out of this garden all year. It's been so fun. Like, in the cool season, they would come over in the afternoon and they would have afternoon tea by eating shelling peas and sugar snap peas and things like that in the garden, and then they got really excited about the berries, and they were always out picking blueberries or picking blackberries. And then more recently they've been out harvesting cherry tomatoes for afternoon tea or for lunch, and that's been really lovely to be able to share the abundance with my friends and know that my friends are benefiting from my work here, and that everyone's going to be a little bit healthier because of what I'm doing here. Knowing what produce the kids have loved has motivated me for next season in terms of what I'm going to grow. So I will bias more Valentine cherry tomatoes rather than other types of tomatoes, just because that was so useful to the kids and so helpful to my friend. And like, if I can dedicate a whole bed or even like a whole tomato plant to another family, then I am spreading the abundance. It's also been really nice to share the blooms and enjoy the magic of the garden with the kids. One of the things in regards to health that I think about a lot in this garden and when I'm sowing seeds is they did research into areas where people were more likely to live to 100 and what the variables were that perhaps influenced their healthy long lives and their longevity, that potentially that we can apply to our lives. And I remember reading that they had something like an average of 60 different vegetables in their regular rotation of vegetables in their annual diet. And I remember thinking, there's no way that I have 60 different vegetables in my diet. And they're not talking about, you know, like 5 different variations of tomato, counting as 5. So it was really kind of an eye-opener, and so that's part of the reason why I grew the tromboncinos this year. It's part of the reason why I am trying to grow different things each year, is to bring in variety, bring in more fiber, bring in the microbiome a little bit more, and work to achieve a better health balance based on those mostly plant-based diets that they found in those blue zones where people had an amazing longevity. Looking at the gut microbiome is something that I became much more interested in and much more aware of when I first adopted Rafa. He is currently inside, but he showed signs of hip dysplasia at 4 months old, and at that time he was recommended to have this hideous surgery where they basically cut his pelvis on both sides in 2 different places, and then I had to somehow keep him relatively immobile for 3 months so he could heal after that. And to me, I'm a physical therapist. That just sounded barbaric, and I just couldn't understand the mechanics then of how that would change the depth of the hip joint. If you did that surgery, I can see that it would put everything in a more optimal alignment, but if you still have a problem with the depth of the hip, it doesn't change that. And Raffy Staffy, oh my God, he's so full of beans. I just can't imagine him being incapacitated for months on end. It would have been a nightmare for both of us, and I just couldn't work out how I was going to manage this. And so I started looking down other routes, and what I discovered was that the gut was a huge part of it, getting the inflammation down, keeping his weight under control, and it all kind of made sense. And he was also having skin issues and being itchy, and we lived in a house that had a fair bit of mold, and and I was wondering whether he had food allergies and all of these things, because he was a puppy that was born in a DV situation, and the mum had no milk because the dogs had been left when the situation went down, had been left alone in the house with no food, no water, nothing for 10 days, and the puppies had been born in that time. And so they all had hideous stomach infections. And what I learnt was that if the microbiome is not ideal or is disturbed in that early phase of life, is that you can then see a cascade of events. And with dogs, they say if you don't have it sorted by the end of that first year of life, then what you will see is a snowball of autoimmune diseases and allergies and all of those sorts of things. And I was reading this information and going, oh my God, this is me. And how is this information not more available and talked about in the human world? Because I, as I said, was allergic to breast milk, had all these food issues early on. Obviously my gut microbiome was completely messed up, and then my immune system had that insult where it didn't realize that breast milk is actually helpful, and then it didn't really learn where the red line is between me and an invader it needs to attack, and so it likes to attack me. And then because we tried, my mum tried, she took me to all these specialists, but back in the day they just didn't have the information they have now, and they didn't have the treatment options that they have now. And even now it's improved so much in the last 5 years than, compared to back in the 80s. And anyway, but so I was like, oh my God, that is why I have all these problems, is because my gut got stuffed up in the beginning, and then it's just been a snowball ride downhill ever since. So it was actually my dog that led me to this journey of health, which is why I want to include them. I'm allergic to bees and recently was bitten by one, hence I'm getting away from this guy. But it's why I want to include my dogs in this food journey. It's why I've become so obsessed with the microbiome and become obsessed with trying to find varieties of food and bring them into my diet, and try and bring in as much color variation as well, so that you're getting all those benefits from all those different plants that these bees help us create and help pollinate. And to be honest, I've seen a lot of specialists in my life, And even when I've directly asked a lot of them about the gut microbiome, the knowledge is not ideal. So I figure I'm on my own in this experiment, except for you guys hanging out with me, but we just need to try something different, because the standard medical system isn't working for me. One of the other big motivators for me is that I live by myself, and in order to sustain a mortgage and to sustain the hobby of gardening, I cannot afford to buy organic food. I also live rurally, so there's a lot of things that we either can't get down here or can't guarantee that they are organic, or you just cannot get them. And there's a lot of lack of variety in our supermarkets for sure. There's no way you would find a tromboncino in a supermarket, and I kind of get that because they are massive. The ones I have inside are 1.2 meters. They are huge, but this plant alone provides a huge amount of variety in terms of how you can use it and what it provides to your body. So if you eat it when it's green, you can use it like a zucchini. If you wait like I'm waiting for these, they're starting to go yellow, but they will go orange like a butternut pumpkin or a winter squash. And then you can use them like a winter squash. They become shelf stable. So in terms of why I'm gardening, I get access to organic vegetables that I could not afford, or I could only afford to buy some things organic, and I get huge variety of plants. I also buy gluten-free food because I cannot eat wheat. It upsets my stomach. I'm not celiac, but it just messes me right up. And so, like, it's kind of crazy to say this, but my baseline groceries are already 4 times more expensive than other people's. That might sound insane, but when my best friend had COVID, they're a family of 5. I did their groceries and my groceries were more expensive. And I thought, I must be buying too many snackies and just being ridiculous, because this is crazy. Why is it cheaper to feed a family of 5 than one person? And then I went around and had a look at the per 100 gram cost of things, because I'd never done that before, because it didn't matter, because I had to eat gluten-free. So what choice did I have? Pasta, the bread, all the gluten-free stuff is at least 4 times more expensive than regular. So if you then add gluten-free and organic, I'm going to go broke by Tuesday. So if I grow my own food, I get a better quality of food and I get the variety. Not to mention the fact that homegrown produce tastes way better than what you can buy at the supermarket, to the point where we had my best friend's garden high tea party here the other day, which I think is the video before this one, if you want to go back and see what we did. And the kids brought a friend with them, and that beautiful friend was like, I hate tomatoes, but these tomatoes are really nice. So like 13-year-olds, they don't, try and fluff you up and make you feel good about your tomatoes unless your tomatoes actually taste better than what's in the supermarket. And he was surprised that he enjoyed tomatoes and happily ate some, which was really great. The I hate tomatoes line is one I've heard before. My nephew likes to tell me all the time that he doesn't like tomatoes, but he eats Pippi's tomato sauce that I make from homegrown tomatoes. And with no complaints. In fact, he refuses to eat other dinner because he wants my tomato sauce. So taste is a really huge motivator for why I do this, because it tastes better for me, it tastes better for the kids. If it tastes better for the kids, you're more likely to get them to actually eat their vegetables without it being a real wrestle, which I know it can be with kids, even though I don't have any living children, but they are way tastier. And something I noticed is I always thought I had terrible taste buds, and I never thought I would be someone who had a sophisticated palate. And I still don't think that I have a sophisticated palate, but I can taste so much more now. I used to be like, people would be like, oh, what does it taste like? And I'd be like, food. Because I could never tell, oh, there's the tomato, there's the onion, there's the whatever. It just tasted like, that's what a meatball tastes like. That's what a sandwich tastes like. I can't even think of any food because I'm not that hungry at the moment. But now I can really taste things more and things have more flavor, and I realize it's not that I had no taste buds, it's that our food is bland. Not anymore. It's also a freshness thing. I remember reading about how quickly the nutrients in our food degrades after it's picked, and it's kind of terrifying, and to the point where I'd be surprised between the soil quality that we have now and the shipping times and how food is picked and transported, if our food has any nutrition in it at all. And you can really taste the freshness in food that has just been picked. As I said, we just did a garden high tea party. You can see the table where we did it. But I made scones for the high tea, as you do, and I got some berries for going on top of the scones, and also because my best friend wanted a strawberry shortcake for her birthday. No problem, we can do that. But unfortunately, my berries are not in season at the moment, and you kind of need fresh berries, not frozen berries, for those sorts of situations. But to be honest, I might next time try and use like maybe more of a strawberry compote instead, because when I was going around the store, I had a really hard time trying to pick particularly blueberries that weren't obviously old. Now that I know, having picked blueberries from my own garden for 2 years and having not bought store-bought blueberries or strawberries for 2 years, now that I know what a really fresh berry looks like, I was looking at them more like and in the end I picked the best ones I could find, and the strawberries actually turned out to be pretty okay, but the blueberries were, and I was, again, reassured that I'm doing the right thing, because they tasted better, they were way fresher, and the blueberries were actually kind of a bit like hard and chewy compared to the ones that you grow from home, which burst in your mouth. So fresh grown, fresh picked is the way to go. We are down in the orchard now, and in an area where I recently planted up all these containers that I had lying around with a whole bunch of seedlings that were desperate to get in the ground. And the motivator here was to try and bring a pop of color to the orchard, because there were still heaps of flowers on my watermelon plants, and I know the chance in autumn of getting watermelons at this point is not in my favor, but I wanted to optimize it if at all possible, especially because this March has been so hot. I was kind of like, well, maybe we might get away with it. And that environmental side of things has been a really huge motivator. So what this has done is bring the bees back down to this area to hopefully pollinate some things. I don't think the watermelons will actually work out, because the ones I picked the other day that were technically ripe were rubbish inside, so I've frozen them and I'll save them for the chickens when we get chickens. But I think the environmental side of things has really come into focus a lot more this year. Last year was our first year in this house, and I was really excited to see all the willy wagtails and the finches and the sparrows just come flocking into this garden, and we really had like not a lot of slug pressure and not a lot of caterpillar pressure compared to other gardens I've been in, because we had that wildlife. Now, some of it is because we back onto the bush and onto the river, but some of it is also just that they are aware that there is a huge change in this garden. It used to just be standard grass with the standard plants that everyone has in their backyard, and now it's totally different. And something that I've really enjoyed seeing this year is the mass of native bees that I never even knew existed. The blue banded bee and the teddy bear bee, I have gone on and on about them. I'm totally obsessed, and part of the reason I did this is so that they would have flowers to take them through as we go into the cooler months, so that they could make sure that we have more native bees for next year, and so that they can fill their little burrows with pollen, so that their little baby bees have something to work on before they emerge when the weather warms up next season. They say when you plant things, and I know they're referring to perennials, that first year it sleeps, second year it creeps, third year it leaps. Well, if this is how much pollinator activity we're going to see in the second year of gardening here, the second full summer season, I'm really excited about our next summer. It's going to be pretty epic, given how much it changed just year 1 to year 2. So year 3 should be a lot of fun. Another side of the environmental things that I find really motivating is the climate impact. Now, you don't actually have to believe in climate change. You can believe whatever you want to believe, and that's okay. But what there is actual evidence for is that our soil is rubbish, and that affects the nutrient density in the food we eat. There's also a lot of evidence that compost holds up to 20 times its weight in water. And there's also evidence that if you're tilling soils or digging your soils up a lot, you are actually releasing carbon into the atmosphere rather than storing it in the ground. So one of the things that has been really motivating for me is to work on my compost bins. Now, not only is this reducing the amount of stuff I'm putting into landfill and giving me free garden soil, it is also doing some great environmental work and helping me in terms of the fact that we live in Australia. It gets hella hot here in summer, and it's been a very dry summer, but it has not been our driest summer, and we get very, very dry periods very frequently. If I can gradually work on filling my garden beds with more and more organic matter, I'm not going to be as much of a drain on the system with the water, because my soil is going to just hold on to water more naturally. Now, our native soil holds moisture quite well because we back onto a riverbed. However, it also becomes like a soup kitchen if it does rain, so it would kill a lot of my vegetables, which I'm not down with, which is why I have raised garden beds. But when I'm in the garden beds, I'm really trying not to dig up the soil. I'm trying to cut the plants off at the base of the stem so that everything can compost in place, so that I'm not always disturbing the soil and the microbes in there. And that as much as possible we can improve the soil in this garden so it can hold a little more carbon, it can hold more water and mean I don't have to do as much work watering it. It's also going to mean my food tastes better and has way more nutritional benefits for me. This is one of the reasons why I'm switching doing potatoes from garden beds to grow bags. So far it hasn't been that successful, but I think if I could put more compost in the grow bags, then that will help. But it just means that I'm not also having to physically do the labor of digging up an entire garden bed and disturbing the whole thing and then having volunteer potatoes turning up in every garden bed till the end of time. So there are multiple reasons why I have switched to potato grow bags, but one of them is that so I don't want to be digging up the soil all the time unless I absolutely have to. The only problem I've had with compost is that I can't produce enough. I have 4 compost bins, a worm bin and a turny bin. Now, they were full at the end of winter last year because I took all the autumn leaves from my parents' house and turned them into compost. But in the end, it only turned into like one bin that was 3/4 full. So you can produce a lot of like garden scraps and plant cut-offs and lawn clippings, and it doesn't turn into a huge amount of soil. So one of the things I need to work on is to actually produce even more compost. And wanting to produce more compost brings me to what I'm going to do with this area, which is currently just a wood pile and a giant mess and stuff I need to put away in the shed. This area is going to, well, some of it is going to become a chicken run. It's not going to be the hugest chicken run because I am 1 person and 2 dogs and we only need so many eggs. And technically, if I'm still on my leaky gut diet, I'm not actually supposed to eat eggs, but I can now start trialing them. But I don't want to end up with like 600 eggs a day because what am I going to do with them? What I am most looking forward to from having chickens is having them help me produce more compost and having them speed up the process, because I am hopeless at turning my compost and I'm hoping that the chickens are going to get in there, scratch things around and get it to break down heaps faster, which is going to mean that I'm going to have more compost to add to the beds. Having chickens is just the latest leg of something I love in the garden, something that motivates me, which is continuing to learn about something. And I am learning a lot about chickens and the things that they poop out every time I log into Facebook, and sometimes I'm wondering if I want to know these things. But again, it all comes down to food quality and health and trying to produce eggs that have less crap in them and that are a better nutritional quality, because I'm controlling as much as you can the situation and what they're eating. But I love learning in the garden. I love what it's taught me about life. I love what it just has taught me so much about nature and watching things grow and being patient and giving nature a chance and the potential of one seed. It's pretty amazing. I would love to have a full-on homestead, but I think it's fairly evident from this mess that this standard residential plot, which is 1/4 acre-ish, is already a lot for 1 person to handle, and perhaps it takes a little bit more work to do this than I first realized, which is why it's always nice to start on a smaller scale. And I have debated things like maybe it would actually be easier if I had a larger plot of land, because then you wouldn't have to have all the garden beds in such a confined space, which would mean it doesn't matter if the plants flop over and into the alley, because you don't have to get through an alley because there's a huge amount of space between each garden bed. So there are some things that I try and justify in my head that it will actually be easier and less maintenance if I have a homestead. But I'm still in the skill acquisition phase. This is like early days of having an urban homestead, and I'm learning so much, and the next phase is going to be chickens. And I'm still learning every year about what plants can tolerate, how I can push them, ways I can get more produce out of the garden, and ways that I need to activate myself more in order to maximize the space. So last year we had heaps of areas that I needed to plant up and just didn't have seedlings ready. A lot of my seedlings failed. I did still have some seedling issues this year, but I've done a much better job at keeping the garden beds full and having something to go in as soon as something came out. This year I'm more sitting around waiting for something to come out so something can go in a bit more. But I do still have patches where I haven't planted anything up. for various reasons, and I want to eliminate that next year. That's the goal. Whilst I'm really excited to be bringing chickens into the garden, one of the things that I've had to kind of realize is that even though our system is screwed up, and even though having a vegetable patch in my backyard does give me some security, you're never really going to be able to be truly independent, especially as a solo homesteader. There is just too many things that we rely on and so many skills to acquire. And even if I wanted to produce my own meat, which in theory I would love to, because then I know what my dogs are eating, I know what I'm eating, it probably tastes better, and I imagine it's way better for you because, again, you know what's in it, you know what it's been fed, you've controlled the situation as much as you can. I couldn't do it. Even if we're not talking about learning to process your animals that you produce on the farm, I just don't think I could. I really want to be best friends with a cow, like really want to be best friends with a cow, which I know sounds insane, but whatever. But I just don't think I could eat my chickens. I just don't think I could eat my cows. I think I would be emotionally attached to the cow, and I think I would be devastated when it eventually passed at whatever the ripe old age for a cow is. And I just have to be realistic that it's not possible to be entirely independent, as much as my drive to be independent is part of what pushes this project forward. And a lot of that has just come from the fact that I've had, difficult years previously, and that I don't want to feel like I'm reliant on someone to help me through those times. I can help myself. I can do it. Because in my 20s, when I had cancer, I felt bad that my parents had to support me, but the cost of treatment, we're lucky in Australia. We have Medicare, we have private health. After I had finished the main part of my treatment, I went traveling to kind of let it all go, and I did the Camino de Santiago. And while I was in Spain, I met this American girl who I was telling about my treatment, and she was like, I would just have to die. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she was like, I would just have to die, because they couldn't physically meet the costs of treatment in America because it's so high. So I know we're lucky here, but I also know that on an average year, my medical costs are at least 10 grand. I know on a bad year, they're about 30. So if I can use this garden and anything that I can create to help reduce those costs, it does counterbalance the costs of setting up the garden. But obviously health is everything. And I unfortunately know that extremely well. And my hope is that over the years of eating garden fresh produce that is increasingly nutrient rich every year, because we've been working on the compost, because we brought the chickens in and they helped us produce more compost, because I'm learning more and growing different varieties, because I'm getting better at processing and preserving food. My hope is that my medical bills will start to drop, and that my reliance on somebody else to help me will start to drop, because I don't like being reliant on somebody else. I don't think it's fair that I'm reliant on somebody else. But there are times when I've had to be. But more than anything, I would just like to be healthy. I would like to feel good all the time, and I would like to not spend $10,000 a year on an average year for medical costs. As I mentioned earlier in this video, a few months ago I gave birth to a stillborn little boy, so I could make a very strong argument that nature is cruel, but I've been forced to admit that nature is also magical. There's really no other way to put it. There's something really amazing and therapeutic about watching what one seed can become, about watching plants grow each day. And it's kind of one of those things, I didn't think you would notice it on a day-to-day basis, but I have been at home for the last few months, obviously getting over the traumatic things that have happened and having more surgeries and having even more fun things happen. But I have just marveled at the growth of these plants, and some of them, like the tromboncinos that I showed you earlier, you can literally see them grow. The pumpkins on the front archway that I showed you at the beginning of the video, they're still growing like a foot every 2 to 3 days, and it's insane to actually be able to physically see that change on a day-to-day basis. And it does restore my faith in nature to some degree, and on some days more than others, but it does make me really marvel at the power of one seed. This archway is 2 loofah seeds, that's all, and I've got at least 18 massive loofahs like this one, so I am not ever going to need to buy loofahs or sponges again. And what amazes me is that 2 seeds have produced so much. I have put next to no effort into this, and inside each one of these loofahs is a stack of seeds that are going to come out of the bottom of the plant and produce next year's and next year's and next year's loofahs. And so it does make me marvel at the power of nature and what one seed can produce in one season, but what one seed can contribute overall to the grand scheme of things. These loofahs have taught me about potential and about how if you just give it a go, something great can happen. And yeah, okay, you might have to hold your breath, and yeah, the road might be real bumpy, but sometimes something amazing can happen if you just give it a chance. The fact that this garden has introduced me to creatures I never knew existed, like the blue banded bees and the teddy bear bees, is amazing. The fact that we were able to sit in this garden and have a high tea and watch the bird life is amazing. That we had teenage boys running through this garden playing hide and seek because there's just a little bit of magic in here now is amazing. The fact that we can grow nutritious, amazing tasting food in this garden is incredible. And yes, this year has been very, very hard. Yes, it has been the worst one of my life by a country mile. But there have, much to my surprise, still been things to marvel at and still been peace to find in the garden. And that peace and that relief from grief and the lessons on being present and in the moment and just focusing on what you're doing at that time and watching this beautiful seed turn into something insane like a tromboncino or 18 loofahs, that has been invaluable and all the motivation I needed to continue this for the rest of my life. In terms of motivation, it doesn't hurt that it is also beautiful to look at, even if in desperate need of deadheading. It's still just so gorgeous in this garden, and I just love it so much. This garden has taught me a lot about how much can change in the space of a couple of months. And I think at this time in my life, going through what I'm going through, that has kind of been like the world's most important psychology lesson. Things can change, things can get better, things can be beautiful again. And I just hope that you guys have enjoyed coming with me as we talk about all the amazing things in this garden that motivate me to continue to push on, that motivate me to work, that help me get through life. And I hope that you guys have enjoyed it. And hopefully you feel the same way too. And hopefully I'll see you in the next video.